Good evening and welcome to Gibson's Bookstore Remote. I am Elizabeth, the events coordinator at Gibson's Bookstore, and I am joined this evening by Marek Bennett. Marek is a local New Hampshire cartoonist who we have hosted several times before. We love to have him back, and he is here tonight to present his new travel journal, the Sharjah Sketchbook. Welcome, Marek. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for signing books for Gibson's. His book is available as well as his other books at Gibson's Bookstore, and we do happily ship right now in this pandemic and offer curbside shipping. But with that in mind, can you tell us a little bit about Sharjah Sketchbook?
Sure. Well, thank you very much for hosting this. I guess I've been a lifelong Gibson's book reader, and I really appreciate all the support you give to these events and to local authors too. I brought my copy of Sharjah Sketchbook. In fact, I brought two copies. I brought my original sketchbook copy that I drew into, and I brought a copy, and I thought what we'd do tonight is read a little bit from both. I'm going to start in the original sketchbook, and then I'll probably quickly move into the book itself. But this started, I think the best way to show you is to switch to my desktop camera and let the book tell the story, because this is one of those books where it really starts, it tells its own story. I wanted the book to feel like a lot of my books, where you just start off with a mysterious email. So let's see, I got an email about a year ago saying, "Greetings from Sharjah Book Authority. We would like to invite you to participate in Sharjah International Book Fair, 11 days of comics workshops in October and November of 2019. And my first reaction was like, wait a minute, what if it's a scam? And then I realized, well, it must be legit. What kind of scammer goes after indie cartoonists? So I decided it must be legit. And I decided if I'm going to go to this place in United Arab Emirates that I had never traveled to before, what better way to experience it than to draw it as a diary comic? And I always draw myself as a cartoon bunny rabbit here. So what I'm going to try to do in a couple pages here is capture some of the impressions I had as I got ready on the trip. So first thing I thought was, I've been trying not to fly lately, you know, climate change and all. And my job as a cartoonist, I like to tell people I'm not drawing a specific thing, I'm drawing an idea of a thing, just trying to give you a sense of my emotions and ideas as I think about these things. But talking with my dad opened my mind. And I remember my dad said, he asked what I was planning for the fall. And I said, I'm thinking of doing this trip. And he said, when I was your age, I had an invitation to tour China, and I've always regretted turning it down. And when he said that, I said, okay, thanks, Dad. That's the encouragement I needed, just to give me that little push of do it, because you don't know what 2020 is going to bring. You don't know if you'll have a chance to see these places in 2020. That's what I took from that, and I'm so glad I did. So I decided, well, I'm going to bring along my sketchbook, and I'm going to draw everything that happens to me. And immediately I found myself encountering like some thoughts in my own mind. First thought I had was, wait a minute, United Arab Emirates in the Middle East, this is cartooning in the Muslim world. I have no idea what to expect here. And people said to me, oh, you're going to the Middle East, huh? Don't they just execute cartoonists there? Well-meaning people who are like hoping to help me think about my trip, I think. Somebody said to me, try not to get blown up or kidnapped, har, har, har. And I think they were joking. But I actually did find myself remembering those Danish cartoons from 2005 and Charlie Hebdo from 2015, terrifying moments for cartoonists. I mean, look them up if you don't remember them. And I realized I have all these preconceptions and stereotypes in my own head and in the questions that I was being asked that maybe I was confronting by drawing here. So this page kind of sets me up for this. As I understand it, Islam avoids images of holy subjects and beings, and there's more about this in the book. Because, for example, Allah is not just some great, big, powerful person. Better to draw the word to represent the bigger idea. In other words, text and image possess sacred creative power. I can relate to that, because I always say, I like to present cartooning as an ancient art form that goes all the way back to cave paintings. I'm not going to draw Allah, but what about drawing people as animals? Well, We'll find out, because I thought I didn't know, if you're going into a place, I want to go with respect. I want to go with an open heart, an open mind, and learn from the people I meet there. And what if I show up saying, oh, I draw myself as a rabbit. What animal do you want to be? Will that be respectful or not? I encountered this before in this kind of storytelling in books I've done before. I did an entire graphic novel about family stories in Slovakia, which was 2011. And I drew myself as a rabbit. And I realized drawing in churches there and drawing church stories would be, it wouldn't be appropriate to draw the characters as animals. So I had to adjust my style according to the cultures that I'm drawing in. Actually, I'm going to switch gears here. I'm going to come out of the book and go into the original. So I brought along, this is the actual sketchbook that I took along, that I drew on that page I just showed. And when I went, I took a bunch of Flair felt tip markers, a bunch of Blick water-based markers. I just sort of stuffed them in my backpack. I brought maybe a pencil or two, but I really didn't bring too many pencils on this trip because I knew I was going for 10 or 12 days and I wasn't going to have time to like carefully sketch pictures and then ink them. I knew this was going to be so fast that I would draw directly with ink for most of this. So I brought along my trusty 5.5 by 8.5, 5.5 by 8.5 inch sketchbook. And the first thing I drew, probably the day before the trip, was I pulled out a map and I said, okay, where am I going? And let me get a couple places straight. So in case I get lost, I'll know my way around. So this is a quick overview of part of the Middle East, the Persian Gulf here. We have Iran up here. We have Iraq over here, over here, Saudi Arabia all through here. And then United Arab Emirates is a collection of emirates that are each controlled by a different family. Right in here. And Sharjah is the city-state or the emirate right next to Dubai. So I go into this book not as an expert on the region, not even speaking the language. In fact, kind of, I think, licensed as a newcomer to maybe come with an open mind and approach people as a cartoonist, I hope. So we'll see how that goes. So the story that comes with this book, every page has a story to it. So I'm flying on this plane flight direct from Boston. This is the route of the plane flight right here, right over Basra, Iraq, and across the Persian Gulf and into Dubai, and then a quick 10-kilometer drive to Sharjah or so. And on that plane flight, it's like a 14-hour flight. And I remember sitting there there was a woman seated next to me. And you know how it is on the plane, we're just sitting, staring straight ahead or watching a movie or reading or something. We didn't interact the whole plane flight. And then as we're coming in, we tried to sleep and so on. About the last hour or so of the plane flight, finally I realized I've got to draw something. So I pulled out my sketchbook here and I just started drawing the last scene I remembered from leaving home, which was just before Halloween, my niece and nephew running around, helping me collect, they're collecting acorns, I'm collecting beans over here. And we were cleaning up the garden and I just started doodling it. And it was such a lesson to me. I started doodling and the woman next to me in the plane seat looked over and said, oh, are you an illustrator? And we struck up a conversation. And I realized, oh my gosh, sitting here, pulling out a sketchbook and starting to draw in a way was an invitation to make a connection with somebody. It was kind of an act of creativity and then something we could talk about, where before there was just this long, awkward silence. So that was a beautiful moment. We spent the last hour and a half of the flight just talking about what we were doing and where we were going. So the next piece I drew is just a couple hours later. And this page says Sharjah International Book Fair 2019. And I don't speak or read Arabic, so I just copied this down off the program materials of the book fair, trying to get a sense of what the writing looks like. And here I'm trying to record a couple memories. In this case, it is me so here I am in the plane looking out over Dubai, and somebody in the plane said, oh, there's the Burj Khalifa Tower. And I saw this amazing tower, twice as tall as any other skyscraper in this metropolis. Never seen anything quite like it. So I wanted to record that as one big picture. And then under the words, just two impressions, my first impressions of Dubai, the space in the airport, and the helpful young woman who helped me get through customs and everything. And then my driver and car that took me out to Sharjah and the book fair, and seeing other people in vans going by. It was, I forget, 9 or 10 at night, but the traffic was incredible. Seeing the planes going off overhead and that coming and going sense. I just wanted to flow across this page. Now in the book, you'll see these original pictures come out a little differently. This one looks about the same, but and the map is there. But this one I inverted those the blacks and whites in the picture because I wanted this to be a nighttime cityscape. So I can do that. That's part of the reason I made the book out of this sketchbook, to take the sketchbook raw materials and tell the story in a little more striking fashion by being able to invert some of them and adjust the artwork a little bit. So let me actually, what follows in this book is just page after page of my notes, day to day, of the people I met and the sitting and drawing the book fair. So we'll come to that. I'm going to switch back to the actual book itself. So when you're reading the book, you see the cleaned up and adjusted and prepared, curated version of that. And I put a couple pictures in too. So this was drawn the night I arrived. It's late, I'm jet lagged, and I just wanted to capture those emotions. And that's what I want this whole sketchbook to be, is just kind of a off the cuff, improvised exploration of each moment that I'm drawing. And if I don't take time to draw something, I can pop a picture in every now and then. So of course, every single day I was there, it was 100 degrees Fahrenheit plus and just sun. This is pure desert. If it weren't for irrigation and desalination plants, there wouldn't be any palm trees here. But these palm trees are planted along the waterfront, and the city grows above them. It's really quite a striking place. And I wanted you just to get a sense. I was coming in on day 2 of this 10+ day festival. And here I am right here, drawing from the past. 9:30 a.m. was my first class. So I got up that morning in the hotel, figured out how to get to the book fair, and dove into all these presenters and all these classes. All the materials are in Arabic and English too. So it's actually, I think, a great place to start to learn some basic Arabic, because every sign and every material you get actually has a translation. So you can start to try to make connections. So I arrived maybe just 10 or 15 minutes ahead of the first class because of the way the buses and the cars and the traffic were. And I found the classroom. This is in, I think in hall 7. So there's this yawning convention hall, and they built this little walled classroom in the corner for us. These were all our wonderful assistants who were helping us out. And soon I know there's kids who are going to come pouring through that door and start our first class. I didn't know what was going to happen. And I was feeling a little nervous. So I pulled out my sketchbook and just drew what was in front of me. And that's the practice I want to use throughout this whole book. Anytime there's a pause or I want to try to understand something, I'll pull out my sketchbook and try to capture a little something of what it looks and feels like, drawing the idea and the feeling. So I'm juggling supplies while students file in, and they give me a microphone because this is a loud environment. Okay, testing. Good morning. And all the students stand up out of their seats, unbidden. Good morning, they all shout in unison. Oh, right, please be seated. And they all sit. I forgot that custom. And a lot of schools around the world do that. Let's draw some comics. Yes, my first class of the fair, a group of bright, friendly girls from India, and they just launched into drawing their comics. And that looks a little like this. We pass out paper and pencils and we say, okay, now we're ready to draw stories about books that changed our lives, because we're at a book fair, right? So that's a good place to start drawing stories. Sumaya draws the first time she read The Secret Garden. And she shows her brain leaping out of her head in sheer joy, zip, And that feeling I identify with. Yes, I know that feeling. And this is actually the theme of the whole fair, open books, open minds. So you'd see that slogan everywhere you went. So just a quick little introduction to Sharjah Book Fair. It is the largest, they say the largest book fair in the Arab world. It is about 2,000 publishers and vendors from 81 different countries, really all over the world. I was really impressed at all the different people you meet just walking around this book fair. 1.6 plus million titles on display. That's a lot of books, not books, but titles. 11 days and nights, so it's October into November 2019, 2.5 plus million visitors. They told me, and these are school groups passing through the central hall into the distance here. They told me they had, I think they had about 100 schools a day. Could that be it? And it was, so that's about 10,000 students a day right there. And you really, in order to reach this final number, you need 10 or 20,000 students coming through this convention center a day. And they came through the kids hall where we were teaching. So that's one thing that I want to point out too, that this book kind of came out of a need on my side to document. I wanted to document, but not just as a travel journal, but actually as a tool for understanding, a tool for connecting with this place that I was drawing in. So I drew myself into this picture. This is one of the snapshots I made. But I found myself, as probably a lot of cartoonists have done, I found myself walking up and down these hallways, just mile after mile, of all these vendors and publishers and books for sale and books for display, and people speaking different languages and in different uniforms and different styles of clothing, and just people from all over the world, and really feeling a little, I just felt a little at odds, not at odds, I felt a little out of place, because I felt like I don't speak the language here. What am I doing here? It was one of those moments of wandering and wondering between classes. And so as a cartoonist, what I do when I feel that way is I sit down and I said, okay, I can always pull out my sketchbook and just start drawing what's in front of me. And maybe what I want to capture here are some of these blinking lights and displays of the Broadcast Authority and the Dubai Cultural Center and all these different kiosks, and maybe some sense of the people coming and going and flowing through here. So I sat down and I started doing that. And those are pages that you see directly in the sketchbook, and a couple of them made it into the final book. But what I realized as I did it, I guess first I took this photograph and a couple photographs like this. I was walking around, I snapped some shots with my camera, and it went like this. So this is the Sharjah Expo Center community. Walking the convention halls, so vast a river of readers. And I'm thinking to myself, what am I doing here? I don't speak the language. I've never been here before. Okay, stopping to snap a photo at the Mexico Pavilion. Mexico is the country of the honored guest, the guest country for that year. And then moving on into this river of readers. And I'm just thinking the word snap, when you snap a photo, right? The snap has a couple meanings. It's a quick moment, like that just happened in a snap. It's also the sound of something breaking, like something snaps. It's a breaking connection, right? So as I'm walking around taking that picture, I'm like grabbing that picture and all the details in it, but I'm not really looking at it. In a way, taking that picture kind of snaps me out of the picture, if that makes any sense. And then the opposite would be coming back later to the same spot, but sitting to draw it. And this doesn't happen in a snap. This takes, 5, 10, 20 minutes, an hour, whatever, however long you want to give yourself. And of course, I'm drawing pretty fast in the sketchbook, right? This is early on in the sketchbook. Here are the pages that I'm drawing. And I'm drawing super fast, really just scribbling, but trying to capture what's in front of me. In this case, what it looks like. And I turned and drew another picture of looking in the other direction, right? And just tried to capture who's there. And if two people are talking or interacting or walking around each other as I draw, I just quickly try to capture that, and they've already moved on. So it's really, you just have to relax and draw as fast as you can to capture, you know, a crowd scene like that. But I realized sitting to draw it, I'm sitting there and parents and kids would walk up and look over my shoulder, and or they call each other over and say, hey, look at this, you know, and or say that in languages I didn't understand, and they would smile at me, or they'd wave. This kind of connection started happening between strangers, and here, snapping the picture, breaking the connection, no interaction. I mean, I went back and took people's faces out of all the photographs in these books because out of respect for the culture of image making and people's privacy and privacy laws in UAE. But snapping that picture did not build a connection. In fact, it actually isolated me further, but sitting and drawing started building this connection. Strangers stopped to say hi. We introduce ourselves. We introduce ourselves, notice each other, and we start talking. I even set the book aside sometimes and we talk for a while. Draw, and I'm thinking draw has another meaning too, as in to pull together, right? When you draw something, you pull together some details, and as you're doing that, as a creative human in space, sitting and taking the time to do it, you draw in other people into the picture, and also into interaction with you. And then I remember this moment of looking up and somebody was snapping a picture of me. And that I drew this a couple different ways in the sketchbook. And finally, I edited in a final panel because that became my punchline there, that I had suddenly become something someone was snapping into their picture. Actually, I think that quick sketch of somebody walking by, a woman walking by, I think that's actually this person who came up and talked to me for a while. It's hard to tell, it's hard to remember, but I remember these discrete moments of people meeting, interacting, walking past. It's amazing what's encoded in something if you take the time to draw it. So we'll come back to this kind of a model. I have a little activity suggestion for you. I want to look at a couple other sections of this book, but that's my basic approach in this whole book is I bring my sketchbook, I sit down, and I start drawing, and then that leads to conversations, that leads to interactions with people. And sometimes we'd be drawing and crowds would form around us. We drew a lot in the hall, the other artists and I. This is my friend Evan, and Emily was another artist teaching with us. And there I am, and these crowds would form, and people would be taking pictures of the artist drawing, calling their friends over. It was just such an intense scene to be in this cityscape and trying to capture what this meant to be drawing pictures together and telling stories with images. So I included a lot of student artwork and some of the images we made with students here too, people that I drew with. So I'm gonna skip actually another scene that I tried to capture is sitting in the guest lounge just to take a break, to have some quiet moments and try to capture some of the conversations we'd had for that morning or something. I'd often end up striking up conversations with some of the volunteers or workers at the fair. And these young women were amazing. Zahra, Zahira, and Mariam, and these wonderful, creative, friendly, outgoing people who would come and just have these amazing conversations during our breaks in the lounge. So I wanted to show you how some of those went. I spent a good amount of time in this fairly short book just trying to capture people's voices, and not just their voices, but their ways of moving and their ways of interacting with me as a cartoonist. So I'm sitting here drawing in the lounge, and I say, oh, I have a cartooning question for you, Zahira. And she says, looking up from her phone. The veil. If I draw my bunnies with ears out, it looks more friendly, to me at least. But I think it's much more respectful to draw ears in, right? I think we have been talking about veils and people's modes of dress and different cultures. So she's a good person to ask about this. And she says, definitely, the ears should not be seen. Okay, got it. Okay, thanks. Phew, I'm glad I asked. And I scribble in veils on all my characters. And actually, we saw that when I drew these kids here. The first day I drew these kids, some of these kids with their ears sticking up out of their veils because I thought it looked friendlier and more cute animal cartoony. Turns out that's not appropriate. So I want to be respectful. I don't want to put anybody in a bad position or make them think I'm disrespecting them. So I'm going to follow that rule. And then Zahira turns the question on me and she says, so why do you draw yourself as a rabbit? And then she kind of watches me draw for a little bit. I say, well, I think it shows you more about me, you know? What do you mean by that? I mean, it shows you my heart. Like, for example, well, which animal would you be? That's the best way, I think, to explain this kind of imaginative animal cartooning, I think, is to turn it back to people and say, what animal would you be? I think this will be difficult because I will be a mythical beast. What is it? The horse with the horn? Yes, that is it. and her friends and cousins are laughing. I will be the unicorn. And they all laugh at her for that. Well, that's a first. And I found a lot of kids, if I asked them what animal they wanted to be, actually said some kind of mythical beast. And I'd never really encountered that. Maybe it's strange. I don't remember encountering that in US schools when I ask students what they want to be if I draw them into my comics. They usually say animals. What animal do you want to be? An animal. A lot of the students here would say a mythical beast. But then she says, you should not draw that. And she really stopped me from drawing it. I think that might have been not something she wanted, not something that was right to draw, considered right to draw. She says, better I will be the dolphin. This will be much easier for you to draw, yes? And we're all laughing. And I'm thinking, well, no, now I have a whole bunch of questions like, does the fin stick out of the veil? Or no, it's not respectful to show the fin. Maybe, I don't know what the rules are. So what does this tell you about me? Huh? About who I am, the dolphin. Oh yeah, she really was listening to me. I'd said, it shows you my heart. So let's test this theory. Well, let's see. Dolphin is intelligent, helpful, always swimming alongside. Very playful too, always talking, sharing, always friendly. Ha, yes, not bad. And Zahra says, what about me? I am Cat. She picked up on it and she's going to be in the game too. Okay, Cat is intelligent, always watching, yes. Oh, a very good hunter. Playful, but also can be a bit dangerous. Zahira says, Cat is too independent. That's why I'd never have a cat. Ha ha, hee hee, it's true. This is all conducted in English because they all knew English. English is sort of the language of business in UAE. Like I said, all the signs are English and Arabic. These young women, it turns out, I believe most of them were Yemeni, actually. But they had lived their whole life in UAE. And in fact, their parents and their grandparents had lived their whole lives in UAE, but they did not have citizenship. And that's a complicated situation I get into in the book. One last thing with this scene, though. This was my favorite part. I'm chuckling along. Wow, that's pretty cool. This is working great. This is a great way to meet people. And Zahra says, and now what about you? Huh? Me? Whoa, wait, and they just started in this gang of my interrogators, my conversants. Zahira says, Rabbit is quiet, cautious, likes to sit in corner and watch. Well, they got me. Yes, and draw in his book. Very observant, quick to learn. Yes, but not always trusting, maybe quick to run away. And I'm just realizing, wow, they're describing all these qualities that I think I do have, and I didn't even realize it. My friends, thank you. I felt seen, and I think they felt seen too. And we give the little symbol, the hand over the heart. I was learning that was like a handshake, like a hug or a handshake. We will come back to see what you draw of the fair. So I met up with them as I went around in the fair, and they would ask about my drawing project, and they would teach me some Arabic words, and I would try to write them and try to get them down and say them. Really helpful. So I do quite a bit of some comics about trying to learn the language, trying to draw with people. The one other thing I think I'll show here, and maybe Elizabeth, I'll show one more piece, and then we can, if people have any questions. I don't want to just talk and talk here. But.
Sure. So I will remind our audience, if you have any questions, journals and cartoonists and comic journals. Now is the time to start typing those out so that we can ask them once you finish this new section. So tell us about this piece.
Yeah, Ask a Rabbit. All right, so this last piece, this is an example of a piece that I drew after I got back, where I went back to a remembered conversation and did a little research, poked around and found some information sources to help sort of support what I was learning in the conversation. So it's a similar conversation. At the end of a class, I say, and so, I think this comes after teaching a class, I say, and so, any questions? And this one woman in the class says, may I ask, why do you draw people as animals? Aha, well, I just finished drawing that answer in my diary. So I actually pull out the passage I just showed you. And I said, well, comics can speak for themselves. And she says, oh, as she flips through my diary, this is interesting. You have here no faces. And she goes right to the no face panel. That jumped out at her. And that amazed me, because for years, I've been telling students, look, work in the 4 key storytelling elements into your comics. Always start with a face, and then show an action, and then show a setting, and include text if you want. Her eye went right to the faceless comics. And she said, well, I said, yes, that's just extreme cartooning, showing as little detail as possible to get at the main idea, and to draw as many stories as possible per day. I have to simplify. But we have this tradition too for depicting holy people, no faces. And that led me to start looking up aniconism and images in Islam where faces are not shown. And oh my gosh, it was such a rabbit hole of research for Rabbit to go down. It really opened a lot of doors to me, this idea that if you don't show the face, well, I drew it out this way. Here I am trying to draw my sketchbook without drawing humans, so I'm just drawing animals. What if I draw no faces as well? What if the story shows only things or hints of characters, right? People in veils where you can't quite see the face. I decide to read up on this no face culture and go looking for a hadith, a documented prophetic tradition. And there are these amazing little scriptural anecdotes about why Islam, some sects of Islam, don't want to see figurative artwork or faces or various types of images. I won't get into that right now, but I'm thinking, wow, amazing, so much to think about. Then I jump back into, I did that research after this conversation. Then I jump us right into the scene where we go to our working table, cartoonists at work. Here in Sharjah, we have a job to do. They asked me to come and draw. I'm going to go sit at the table and draw. And when people walk up and join us, maybe I can use some of those traditions to get into this I really feel a very holy space of creation and storytelling with people. And so that's really at the heart of the book, I think. Learning from another tradition, other traditions and other cultures, learning from people of all ages as we go through this world, and giving them a blank page and seeing what they draw. Here's Sheza's picture of me on the last night of the fair. She walked up and said, so you draw everyone? Can I draw you? And she just bravely grabbed my sketchbook and drew me into it. And I drew her in return. So that's really at the heart of this whole project. I want to really thank the Sharjah Book Authority for inviting me and making this possible, and then just giving me the space and the blank space to fill up these pages with the stories of the people I met, and for gathering this amazing book fair together. And I'm so glad that I got the chance to do it and record it, because this really reads me, you know, it's a book from another world in a way, but it's also a book from our world. And it's I hope a way that you can travel and meet some of the people I met and see some of the things I saw while we're all quarantined here. I hope that makes sense, but maybe we should go to questions if people have some questions.
Sure, we actually have some questions waiting for us, and one of them is from who wants to know, did you draw yourself as a rabbit from the start, or did you ever draw yourself as other animals?
Aha. That's so perfect. I was meaning to make that point when I started, so that's great. I'm glad you're asking. So I think I'll go back. I have a couple of my older books here. So one of the first books I put together about, goodness, 12 years ago now was Hour 72. It's a collection of 3 24-hour comics. And I'm just going to open to the third one. So each of these comics is 24 pages long, drawn in 24 hours. So you can maybe see this is the same approach that I took in Sharjah. Go sit somewhere. Happens to be at the Center for Cartoon Studies, White River Junction. Go sit somewhere. This was the approach I used here. I went and sat on the street. I drew what's in front of me. And when people came up, I'd just draw whatever happened into my comic. And over the course of 24 hours, a lot happens and a lot of strange. I ended up actually in the middle of the night just diving into some Civil War history because that's what I had been reading at the time. And that actually started all the books I've been doing the past couple of years. So I adapted that method into my next book, Nicaragua Comics Travel Journal, where I just took about a month to draw everything that happened. Well, that's a good page. For example, this was drawn on a bus on a bumpy road. So just to draw everything that happened as a couple friends and I traveled around a rural northern Nicaraguan community, teaching in the schools, learning from people, trying our hands at various ways to live in northern Nicaragua, and just learning the culture and getting stories from people and drawing with kids. But here you can see, again, the same approach. What's in front of me? What's there? What's missing? Draw it into the picture. But here you can see they're all humans. I'm drawing just people. And I loved this practice. I loved this model, but I really got tired of drawing myself with my glasses and my baseball hat. And I got a little exhausted trying to capture the actual images of people around me. So my next book, I showed this earlier, I decided I would go to Slovakia, live with my grandmother's cousin in Eastern Europe. I had a very generous, wonderful invitation to go and do that. And I decided I would apply that practice, but so here I am walking around the streets of Bratislava doing that same thing, drawing the statues, the people I see. And I really realized if I drew myself as an animal and the people around me, it freed me up. I got this burst of energy of not having to draw myself and the people around me, but trying to capture their, like we said, their heart, their spirit. And the other thing this taught me is I drew, for instance, this is a direct example. I drew this street scene. I tried to capture everything there, the old cathedral, the Soviet highway, and I took out the modern sculpture I found so ugly and just didn't fit. And then later I came back to this scene and I looked at that sculpture and realized it was a Holocaust memorial. It wasn't just some modern sculpture, and I needed to draw that in. So that taught me to really look at the things I might have overlooked, to look at the details that I might just walk past and really learn from them and try to put together what those details are. And it freed me up. Drawing myself as a rabbit freed me up from looking at the surface of things and made me really dig under the surface and get at the meanings of things. So I think that's what is happening here. I'm really drawing as little as possible, and not even including the surface, but getting at the heart, hopefully, when it works. So yeah, I've been for about 8 or 9 years, I've been kind of an animal cartoonist. I will do stick figures and real people as appropriate, but I really, really value the imaginative space that cartooning allows us in this kind of work.
Helen, how did you picture your big sketchbook?
I'm sorry, could you ask that again? You broke up a little bit.
From your sketchbook.
I don't know if it's my signal or yours, but I'm losing you. Which question is it in the chat? How did you move the pictures from your big sketchbook to the tiny book? Is that it? Okay, I'm lip reading on Zoom here. Well, that's a good question, Helen. I'm starting to do this month in our comics camp online videos. I came home with my sketchbook. Let's see if we can get this. I'll just go back to my desktop. I came home with my sketchbook and I put it on the scanner, and I scanned these images, and I just made them pure black and white images, which really cleans them up. I didn't want to have any grays. And the fact that I didn't use any pencil meant I didn't have to clean them up with an eraser. So it was actually a pretty fast process. I would put on some music, and then I would just scan this page, and so on. Then I'd put on an audiobook, and I listened to a lot of audiobooks, and I processed the images. And I got them all set. And then it's a kind of a long process, but I basically, in a word processor program, I use all freeware. I set up the template and the footers and headers on the page, and I drop the images in. And I spent about 6 months sort of editing and rearranging pages and adding the photos in. So it's these projects, I drew the book in less than a month. And then it took about 6 or 7 months to set up, to get it into this format. Because you wouldn't want to page through this and see all my mistakes and things I cut out and things I redrew and crossed off and gave up on. And you wouldn't, it's unreadable. So the real hard work is not so much the drawing, but it's the sort of whittling it down into shape so it does read as a book.
So Kelsa wants to know, what is the funniest thing that happened to you on your trip to Sharjah? And Catherine wants to know, Marek, did you talk with people about your gardening and music? And did you bring or play any musical instruments for them while you were on this trip?
Yeah, that I didn't hear a lot of live music, and that's not to say there isn't a lot of live music there. I think I was really there drawing full time, but we did several times. I said, several times I said, I wish I brought my banjo. Because this would be the perfect place in between classes to play a little music or something and meet people that way too. That's a good point, that it's not just, sitting and drawing. That's the invitation to community. In many ways, music is a much more social connector than what I'm describing here of drawing, because music by its nature goes out and people hear it, where you could walk by someone who's drawing and not even notice if you don't see them. So I kind of made a promise to myself, if I go back sometime, I'll figure out a way to bring a banjo along, and that'll be another way to meet people, I think. And what was Kelso's, the funniest thing that happened to you on your trip? My goodness, there were so many amazing. Often I find the comedy is mixed in with a lot of other feelings. I don't know, the thing that comes to mind is I like to be a little self-deprecating, and I put Rabbit into situations that maybe make Rabbit look a little silly or a little naive or something, because I feel like that's a part of me as I travel. It's good to just keep looking at, what am I missing here? What's Rabbit missing? And one of the things that Rabbit really learns in here is how his presence changes things, changes social dynamics. And this isn't really a funny moment, but I found it kind of comical, the way I could draw it. Yeah, this is it. So it's not a funny moment. I went and asked for a car to the book fair, and this wonderful guy who was helping us get to the book fair from the hotel whenever we needed to, he called up a car, took me outside, and in this hostly way, brought me to the car, and the car wasn't on, and the drivers had taken a break. They had to take a bathroom break or something. And he started chewing out the driver and yelling at the driver, and I'm standing there and Rabbit's standing there sort of like, I didn't want to cause any trouble, oh no. And it was such an interesting way to see this host culture, because he felt it called into question his ability to host, the fact that the driver wasn't ready with an air-conditioned car at the moment. And from my culture, I'm like, oh great, the air conditioner isn't on, the car's turned off, that's better for the environment, or whatever I was thinking at the time. And to him, it was this horrifying breach of protocol, right? And And it was this, I suddenly realized it wasn't about, this sounds obvious, it wasn't about me and what I wanted. It was about the relationship of the host and the guest that had to be upheld. And so it just kind of, in a way, it gave me a view into the culture. And I kind of laughed about that because when I drew him, I drew him in as a couple characters, really, because he was such a friendly host. I drew him as the friendly host, sort of as Jolly Bear. And then when I drew that scene of him yelling at the driver, I drew him as an alligator. And he became two characters then that I could kind of separate out. And I just really had fun with that. So I guess that's not like comical funny, but I think in the book, when you see me playing, you'll see that I'm enjoying that artwork, I think, because I can draw an alligator with flames coming out of his mouth as that side of that person's character. And I really didn't want to portray that person just as an alligator with flames. I wanted to separate them and sort of see them as two different characters, two different situations. But the other thing that did, since we mentioned that, it also gave me the way, it was like the driver was apologizing to me as we were driving in, and I was like, it's okay. I'd rather have the windows open. I think it's great to turn the car off. And it started a whole conversation with the driver, and then we were kind of friends then. You know, we could bond over that, and I wanted him to know I wasn't angry and impatient. And so that kind of gave us an in to interact. So you'll see in the book, I think I always tell my students, it's the intersection of hard work and fun, right? That place where you're working hard, but also enjoying your artwork. And I found putting myself into those situations that were maybe a little uncomfortable and figuring out how to draw them was just it gave me some insight into the whole experience.
So we have time, I think, perhaps for one more question here. And when you are planning out your travel journal, and it is obviously done sort of on the fly because you can't plan what moments will be meaningful to you. So when you are drawing out this journal, it seems that you are not drawing actions that happened, but feelings that happened, and so can you talk a little bit about journaling visually versus journaling with words?
Sure. Here's what I would suggest. If you have a sketchbook, take a sketchbook. If you just have paper, fold the paper in half. So it's sort of like 2 pages. Because I've been, for years now, I've been thinking sort of the storytelling as, I do a lot of print comics. So I think of it as 2-page comics. If I'm doing web comics, I'll think of it as scrolling and so on. But take a sketchbook or a piece of paper and keep one side totally open, right? And that'll be your sitting and drawing what's in front of me side, right? And go someplace where you can safely be outside and not too close around people and so on. Follow all the advice of the medical experts, but go someplace where you'd like to draw, and sit and draw whatever you see in front of you. And don't ask yourself, oh, is this good? Does this look like it? Don't worry about that, right? Just try to capture something of what's in front of you. On the other page, I'm doing this with a pen because you can work in pencil if you want, but I recommend trying this in pen. I always tell my students start with pencil. You can draw a little box. Let's divide it into 6 panels. How about? Do 2 lines, right? And those aren't perfect, right? They're a little crooked, but that's kind of cool. That's human. And then I'll draw a line down the middle. This gives us 6 boxes, right? And let's assume the reader, you can even number them if you want, if that helps you, but you don't have to. Let's assume a reader reading left to right. We'll start at the top, go across, come down a level and go across. Numbering sometimes helps if you don't do this kind of work a lot. And then as you're drawing, go someplace. I would recommend doing this with somebody. Go and draw together. Sit a little ways apart and draw together. This is actually a great way to still be socially distanced and quarantined, but hang out with somebody. Draw together. And on this page, After you're done, try capturing a little of your conversation or something you thought about or talked about. And you have 6 steps for it. The first thing you thought or talked about, and maybe a response to that. Maybe a response to that, and just carry it through a couple steps. You could even just write the words if you think in words here. You don't even have to draw anything. As we saw, you don't need to have faces. You don't need to have people. But also, as you put the words step by step, just 6 steps of a conversation or a thought process, maybe draw a little something in, or maybe decorate it, right? And do whatever comes easiest to you. Don't try to draw like somebody else, but just try to capture a process in those boxes. And then you step back and look at this picture you drew and something of a thought process that went with it, and see if any connections emerge. And that might be your next page, right? Or then the next day, go draw something else and give yourself a couple boxes and just watch your thoughts gather on the page. That's really all there is to this. Aside from style and artistic technique and stuff, which you learn by doing. That's really all there is to making like a comics travel memoir, is give yourself a little space, fill it up, and don't worry about good or bad. Just fill it up with what you see, and then follow your thoughts through little boxes in order. That's what I would advise. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, I like that. That seems pretty helpful. And I would have thought when we booked this event, I thought that a travel journal you'd be like, well, then I did this, and then I did this. And that's not really, that's an itinerary.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a journal of experiences. So you might have a day where you draw 12 pages, and then a day where you draw 2, because it's not, it's not a calendar, it's not an itinerary, or it's the meaningful experiences, which are more about your impressions and memories and feelings than they are about Susie was wearing a green shirt. And it's not really the details so much as the impressions and the emotions. It's hard to get away from descriptors if you are used to a text journaling. And this is such an interesting way to change the way that you're interacting with the world, especially the amount of detail that you put into that sketch you spent an hour on. Everything was roughed out and sketched, but at the same time, the details were the character looked like they felt like this. And that's very interesting to me. Do you have any final advice for someone who might just be getting into travel journaling?
Equipment wise, I'm a big fan of these black hardcover books you can get, because that's a lot of pages and it holds them all in order, and you fill it up and then you put another next to it on the shelf and you start building your collection. Attitude wise, I would say just learn what interests you, learn what makes you curious, but also watch for what, this will sound wrong, but what repels you or what you kind of avoid. And sometimes there's a story in all that, right? There's many stories in all that, in all those things, and you'll kind of find your own story, but you might not know it ahead of time. If you know it ahead of time, you're just walking along a path, right? But if you're really traveling and exploring, even in your own local town, you're going to discover things. That's actually what I'm working on now. I'm drawing in 1864, what the Freeman Colby Civil War diaries, and I'm doing a side project digging into some Revolutionary War history here in the graveyards of town, and drawing from gravestones. And in that double sense of the meat of the word drawing, like trying to draw these stories out. And I don't know where it's going to go. It's the same kind of feeling I had in Sharjah, except it's in the town I've lived in all my life. So you don't have to travel far to do this thing. You just have to kind of open your heart, open your mind, and sit with a blank page and see what happens.
Well, on that note, everybody, thank you for joining us tonight. We'll see what happens. Everybody, joining us from home, keep scribbling, put those pencils to paper, and you start with a blank piece of paper, but you got to put your pencil to it or your pen, or it's going to stay a blank piece of paper. So thank you very much, Marek, for joining us this evening. Copies of Sharjah Sketchbook are available from Gibson's Bookstore, and I believe you are happily signing those for us.
Yep.
So
let me know if you want a message or signed to anybody, and I'll get them to Gibson's this week sometime.
Thank you very much, everybody joining us from home. Have a great evening, everybody.
Thank you.